So next part is pertaining to useful modeling techniques. So in this, we'll just have a brief aspect of different techniques which are used in modeling. So we'll just see what all things come around. So the first one which comes is the procedural continuous assignments. Now, previously we had studied something called as procedural assignments, right? So wherein we used equal to and the angle, open angle bracket. So we had used these things or closed angle bracket. So we had used these things in procedural assignments. Now there is something called as procedural continuous assignments. The name itself tells that the assignment has to be continuous. Now here, before going to this, just one discussion we can have. That is, you have seen your flip-flops, right? So it is having, say, input, then it is having a clock. Okay, then there is a Q and Q bar. So these are present. Okay, clock. Along with that, you have, say, for example, you have reset and set pins. You have these things also. So now here, what happens is, say, reset is not enabled, so it is disabled. Say, for example, reset is made 0. So if reset is made 0, say I am assuming that it is active high. So when it is 1, then only entire thing gets reset. Now here, when this is the case, right, what happens is if D is 1, suppose if it is a D flip-flop, if D input is 1, after say if it is positive S triggered or level S triggered, so based on this change in the clock, right, Q will be 1. So whatever is there, that will be passed since it is a delay flip-flop. So if this is 0, right, then that 0 gets passed and 0 will be appearing here. Now say continuously if this is 1. Now for example, continuously this is 1. So in that case, okay, if continuously, if this input is 1, that is D is equal to 1. Now here what happens is continuously output Q will be 1 and this one will be 0. Now what I do is even though this is 1, I make a reset. I'll change this. I'll make a reset equal to 1. When I make reset 1, right, actually what happens is it should override this whatever value is there, so which is given to Q, and it should make what Q equal to 0, no matter whether D is 0 or 1. It should override that value and it should make 1. So this will be Q will be sorry Q should be made as 0 whenever reset is 1, right? So Q should be made 0. So what is happening if you hold reset for a very long time? If you hold the reset for a very long time as high, then Q should be 0 for that continuous aspect. So this is what procedural continuous assignment looks for. Now here when say reset was 0, right? Initially when reset was 0, whenever D was changing, Q was changing. So this is your procedural assignment. This is your procedural assignment. Now, no matter what is the value of D, if reset turns out to be high, then Q compulsorily has to be 0, whether D is 1 or not. If D is 1 also, Q has to be 0 when reset is 1. When reset is 1. So this is like your procedural continuous assignment. This is actually overriding your procedural assignment. So this is what we observe in your hardwares. So such kind of things also come in these things. So that is where your procedural continuous assignments comes into play. So these procedural continuous assignments are override the procedural assignments. They override the procedural assignments and they don't behave same as your procedural assignments. So that is one thing what we have to look out for. Now here procedural assignments change the value whenever some of the parameters related to that assignment change. So for example, here when D changes to 0, based on the procedural assignment, Q changes to 0. When D is 1, Q is 1. So whenever there are some changes in D, then only Q is changing. So that is what is happening in procedural assignment. But when reset is made 1, right? Reset is made 1, compulsorily Q will be 0. Compulsorily Q will be 0. It will not be taking whether D is 0 or 1. So that is what it looks out for. So whenever there is change in the value, right, then procedural assignment gets executed and the value will be changed. but that is not there in your continuous assignment. That is procedural continuous assignment. So here, that is most of the parts I have discussed in this case. So we make you, how do we go ahead with the procedural continuous assignment? So previously we saw that we either use equal to or this thing for procedural assignments. But if I want to have a procedural continuous assignment, right, then I can go for assign and deassign keywords. So here, the left hand side of the procedural continuous assignment, it can be only a register or concatenation of a registers. It cannot be anything else. It can be only this part. It cannot be anything else. Apart from this, it cannot be part of this one register that is only few bits. It cannot be, or only one bit. It cannot be one bit in the sense only one selected bit. Only one selected bit. You cannot have something as reg A1. I cannot have this one on the left hand side. Even I cannot have A31 to 30. I cannot have even this also because this is just a part. If it has to be there, then it should be entire. A is equal to or whatever is there. Assign A equal to. So it has to be in this form. It cannot be in the other form what we specify. It should be a complete register or concatenation of the complete registers. It cannot be just a part or a bit of that entire register or the net data type. So this is what procedural assignment looks for. So here we have an example pertaining to the D flip-flop, which makes use of the procedural assignments. So as I discussed with respect to this, right, the same thing is put forth here. Now what we have a module which is named as Edge D flip-flop, and these are the port list, and these are the port declarations what we are having. Okay, these are the port declarations. Then here what we are having is we are having a always block, and this always block will be executed whenever the negative edge this thing event is occurring. Negative edge clock event is occurring. So whenever that is happening, what we do is Q is assigned with whatever value of D is there, and Q bar is assigned with the opposite value of D. So that is what is happening in this case. So that is what we observe in D flip flop. So here we have the clock, here we have D, here we have Q, here we have Q bar. So whenever value of D changes, right, either 0 or 1, Q will be changing. So after every clock, right, after every clock, so he is specifying negative edge. He is specifying negative edge. So during the negative edge, right, that time Q's value will be observed. That is D's value will be observed, and then based on that, so if D is 0, 0 will be assigned. If D is 1, 1 will be assigned. Suppose if this is D, then Q will be, so during this negative edge clock, it will be 0 because D is 0, and during this negative edge clock, it will be 1. A Q bar will be opposite of that. So that is what is happening. Now, if I press reset, if reset is there, whether it is active low or active high, we have to just check out. So whenever there is change in the reset pin, you reset the device. So if that case, if reset is high, then what you have to do is you have to make Q compulsorily 0, no matter what is the value of D. If reset is 1, no matter what is the value of D, Q has to say, for example, at this moment, I have changed the reset. So it may be at any point, I have pressed the reset. So reset was 0 up to this point. Now reset is high. So when reset is high, right, what happens is this compulsorily has to go to 0. And whether this is 1, whether this is 0, it will be there as long as reset is pressed. So if I change the reset pin to low here, so at this moment, depending on what is the value of D, right, that based on that, Q will be changing. So if reset pin is pressed and it is set to 1, Q compulsorily has to be 0. Now, if I write it directly Q equal to 0, right, then I'll not be having the procedural assignment, because whenever D changes, right, again, this part gets executed. Again, this part gets executed. But unless and until reset pin is pressed, right, it has to retain the value of Q equal to 0. Therefore, we have to go for procedural continuous assignment. So we make use of the keyword assign. And similarly, Q bar will be opposite of Q, which is 1. So whenever reset is pressed, Q is 0 and Q bar is 1. So no matter what is the value of D. Okay. So this is how you are executing it. This is how we look out for procedural assignments. Okay. Or else you follow your regular this thing. If reset is not pressed right, you keep Q as it is and Q bar as it is. You don't change it. So that is what he's doing. So here what is performing. So if you release the reset pin, so if this is a reset, right? If you release the reset pin and you make it 0, so here what should happen? Q should be retained with the value of Q and Q bar should be retained with the value of Q bar. And again here what happens is again the value of D comes into picture. So but here remember if you're using assign, right? If you're using assign, it is like you are pressing that reset pen continuously in this case, right? If you're using the assign keyword, right? Whether you're using it in this program or any other program, so if you're using assign keyword, that parameter whatever you are providing with procedural continuous assignment will be retaining its value unless and until that assign is deassigned. Otherwise you have another assign statement which changes the value. So suppose after this, say after 10 units of time, say I specify something as, so here if I specify something as hash 10. So previously what I had assign q is equal to 0. So I'll not be bothering about the syntax. Say I have assigned q is equal to 0. So after 10 time minutes, if I again use assign, right? Assign q is equal to 1. Only during this time it will be changing and it will be retaining a value of 10, and continuously it will be retaining unless and until you deassign it. You have to deassign it. Okay. So here that is what we are doing. We have to deassign q and q bar. Okay. If reset is released, then it should go back to its normal operating condition, that is based on d value and based on the clock this thing it should be changing its value. So if reset goes low, remove the overriding values by deassigning the registers. So that is what we are looking out for here. So in that case, what happens? Your regular assignments comes into play. That is Q is equal to D and Q bar is equal to D bar. So that is what we are looking out for. So we have to use the deassign keyword in order to release the overriding condition. When we use assign, right, we are overriding your regular procedural assignment statement. That is, we are overriding these statements. If I want to prevent that overriding, right, I have to again deassign. So this is what is happening in case of procedural assignments. Now, how we can do the same thing using another operation, that is another keywords, that is force and release. I can force a value to be some. I can force the parameter to hold a value for some to hold some specific value, and then I can release it. So in order to do that, I can make use of the keywords force and release. So this is the second method of procedural continuous assignment. So here what we did, we made use of assign and deassign. But in the other case, what we are doing, we are making use of the keywords force and release. So that is what we are looking out for. So it is a design constraint. What you look out is you don't use it inside the design blocks. So these are just coding methodologies or coding standards what they try to follow. You can have those statements, but they specify that don't use this within the design block. You can use it for debugging purposes or stimulation purposes. So you can use it for those purposes. That is, you want to see how your circuit is behaving. Say in the simulation part, you want to see that whenever some condition happens, how your what is the output pertaining to the IC what you have built, what it is throwing. Is there any error? So if that is the case, then before going into the dumping part, I can perform the forcing conditions and try to see how it is acting. So if any changes have to be done, they can be done in those part itself. So here we have an example. So module stimulus, same D flip-flop. So here what we are doing is we are creating an instance of edge D flip-flop. That is module what we had defined over here. So we have defined a module edge D flip-flop. So this instance of this module is created over here. So we have created, that is we are stimulating it. So as we specified, we try to use it under stimulus block. We don't try to put it in the design block. So here you define the edge D flip-flop. DFF is the say instance of the edge D flip-flop. Then this is the parameters what you are looking out for, or the port list or the terminal list. Then we have an initial, begin, and end. So here, what we are looking out is here you can see that these statements force value of 1 on D flip-flop dot Q. So this is actually hierarchical naming. Okay. So under D, under this instance, I am accessing Q. So that is here we can see that here we have declared Q, right? We have declared Q over here. So I want to access, that is here also you can just, that is Q is declared over here. So if I want to access this one, right, I can take the instance. So DFF in that block module, right, it is DFF is the instance. Using that instance, I'm accessing this value. Okay. So that is what we are doing in this execution. So these statements force value of 1 on D flip-flop dot Q between time 50 to 100. So regardless of the actual output of the edge flip-flop. So you're not bothering what is the output of edge flip-flop, whether D is 0 or 1, but you are forcing the value to be 1 or 0 based on your criteria. So here what you're putting for hash 50. So since this is a sequential block, right? So execution time will start at 0, but after 50 time units, this statement is executed. This statement starts at simulation. So here 50, force D flip-flop dot Q is equal to 1. So you are forcing the value of Q is equal to 1 at time unit 50. Then after that, what you're doing is 50 plus 50, it is 100. So you're releasing it after 100 time units. So it will be from 50 to 100, the value of D flip-flop dot Q, that is the value of Q will be 1. So from 50 to 100 time units. So this is what is happening in this case when you're using force and release. So you can have force and release on nets, but in a previous case, right, I cannot use that is this part. Mm, assign and deassign. I cannot use assign and deassign on say net data types. I can use it only on register and concatenation of registers. But if I want to have some values on the wire data type or the net data type, on the net data type, then I can use this force and release. Use this force and release on that net data types. So here just an example, module top assign out. So here what you're doing is you are assigning it's a procedural continuous assignment what you are having. After that, what you're doing is you are forcing at 50 time units, you're forcing out is equal to this value. So whatever expression evaluates, that value will be coming over here. And after that, you are releasing. So here out is actually a net data type. Out is actually a net data type. So this net data type is forced to change its value based on this expression. And then when you release it, right, it will come back to its normal state. So that is based on this value, right? It will be coming back to its normal value or normal state, whichever is present. It may be 0, it may be 1, it may be in tri-state, it may be in unknown state. So anything can be there. So it comes back to its normal value. So this is for the net data type. So that is what is happening over here. Then we have something specified as overriding the parameters. So what is overriding the parameters? Now, whenever you're passing the parameters, when you're defining the parameters in the module, right, what happens is you can specify some default values to that. You can specify some default values. Now, if I want to change those values, so I create some multiple instances. Say, for example, in above example, what we did is we created an instance of D flip-flop for the module D flip-flop, edge D flip-flop. So we created an instance for that. So if you have multiple instances and in each instances, I want to start off with the D value differently. That is in one module, I want to start off with the D value is equal to 0. And in one module, I want to start off with D value equal to 1. So I can do that. But by default, if I have given 0 somewhere, right? But if I want to override that, this is what we can do. So how do I override the parameters? I can override it using the def parameter statement or module instance parameter statement. So here, what is a def parameter? Def parameter is a def PARM is a it is a keyword. It is a keyword. So here we can use this keyword to say override the parameter value based on the module instance what you're creating. So how do I utilize this? So here you have a module which is defined as hello world. Then you have a parameter which is defined as, so this is the identifier ID number is equal to 0. So this is the default value which is present now. This is the default value. Okay. So now what you're doing is initial end module, since only one statement is there, no need to put forth begin and end. So you're displaying the ID number. So whatever value is there that you are displaying over here. So now what I'll be doing is we have defined top. So it is top on, this top module is over this hello module. So hello module falls within the top module. Okay. So now what we are doing is we are assuming that we have created instances W1 and W2 for this hello world. So what we have done, we have written hello underscore world W1 comma say W2. So we have done that. So we have done that W1 comma W2. That is what we have done. So now what we want to do is, so W1 is having its own ID number and W2 is having its own ID number. So now whether I can override these values and put forth some different values. So if I want to do that, right, I can use the def parameter keyword. So define parameter W1 dot ID number. Since W1 is an instance of hello world, W1 dot ID number will be pertaining to that module instance W1. Under that, its ID number. So it will be 1, and W2 dot ID number is assigned with 2. So now what you are doing is you are instantiating the two hello worlds. So now if you remember C++, right, in that this kind of statements you can execute. So you have hello world W1, and you are kind of instantiating this entire thing. Then again you have hello world W2, you are instantiating this entire thing. So in this case what happens is, since displacement statement is there, right, so it comes over here, it gets to know that it has to display the ID number. The ID number will be displayed based on this value. W1 dot ID number will be equal to 1 for the first one, and it will be 2 for the next one. So default value is override. But if you don't specify the number, the default value will be used. That is ID number equal to 0 will be utilized over here. So that is what is happening when you're using the def parameter, def PARM keyword. Okay. So this is the output what you'll be observing when you instantiate those two statements. Now I can have the same behavior using model instance parameter values. So what is that is, if I want to override the default values, right, when the modules are instantiated, I can do it at the time of instance, at the time of instance. So here what we have, it is simple. So we have module top. Under that, directly what we'll specify is, previously we were specifying hello world W1 and bracket. So that is changed. So hash in within the brackets we're specifying 1. So this 1 will be overriding the value of 0. That is in this case. Since there is one parameter, right, it will be overriding this 0 over here. So it is same as the previous statements, but in different form. So you are, during the time of instance itself, you are specifying this value. So for W2, you are providing the value of 2. So that is what is happening. Now here only one parameter is present. So in this case, right, we are having only one parameter. Now in we can here we have having only one parameter. We can have even n number of parameters, right? In that case, what should be the specification is, for example, if it is ID number 1, ID number 2, and ID number 3. So in that case, when you're specifying these things, right, you should be specifying in proper order using the module instance, not this part, because here you can specify W1 dot ID number 1 is equal to 1 and W1 dot ID number 2 is equal to 2, something you can specify like this. But when you're using module instance, right, in when you're specifying with the instance in this bracket, so in that case, it should be in the same order in which it is specified. So that care has to be taken. So here an example is there, module bus master parameter delay 1, delay 2, and delay 3. So these are the default values 2, 3, and 7. Now here you have defined a module top, and you're creating an instance of bus master. That is this module. So what you're doing is there are three parameters, right? So here 4, 5, and 6. So during the instance itself, you are putting 4. So here what happens? Delay 1 will be having a value of 4, delay 2 will be having a value of 5, and this one will be having a value of 6. Now here you can see that bus master, only these two are specified. So this is like first delay 1 is having a value of 9 and delay 2 is having a value of 3. But third one is not specified. So what happens is by default, this value will be taken 7. That is what you are looking out for. So this is pertaining to using the module instance to override the parameter value. So this is what is happening in these cases. And next part which comes is conditional compilation and execution. The name itself tells that compilation should happen under based on some conditions when they are satisfied, or execution should happen based on the conditions when they are satisfied. How do I check the conditions? I can check the conditions based on some flags. If it is set, performs this operation. If it is not set, don't perform that. So that is you are directly telling, you are indirectly specifying that if this flag is set, you compile it. If this flag is not set, don't compile it. Or if this thing is there, then do this operation compilation. Or if this thing is there, do execution. So it is like you are controlling the compilation and the execution. So compilation happens during the compile time and execution happens during the run time. So you can control these things in during the runtime also, during the compilation time also. But what you do is you have to check out some conditions. Based on that only you put forth. So now first one, the conditional compilation. So compilation should happen under specific conditions. So whenever the compiler, and in order to do that, we have to make use of the compiler directives. So even in C programming, you have some compiler directives at the starting, right? Like hash include and hash def. So similar kind of things we have over here, but this is different. You are controlling the compilation over here, whether the part of the code has to be compiled or not. That is what you are looking out for. Now, why these conditions come is because different systems behave differently. And being a designer, you cannot write code which executes. So you cannot write a code. So now it is executing on system 1. On system 2, it is not executing. You change the code and make it to run on system 2. So you cannot do it for n number of systems. It is a very tedious process and it is not feasible also. So under such conditions, you can just go for that. Say if the system is having these specifications, then compile this part. Otherwise, don't compile this part. So something of this kind. So if system 1 is having 4 GB of RAM, I'm just taking a vague example. If system is having a 4 GB of RAM, then you put forth a message telling that compilation is not possible, so this part will be skipped. Or execution is not possible, this part will be skipped. So you might have seen when you're installing some of the softwares and all, even those things you might have observed that your system is not supporting, so this part is not, this package is not provided to you, something in this form, right? So that is how you look out for. Even for compiler, even for execution time, right? Some of the executions are possible on some systems and some are not executed on some other systems. It is because of all these things that one system might behave differently and the other might be slightly different from the other system. Because of that, the behavior changes. So, and being a designer, I cannot look for all these things. So how do I curb these things? I curb it using these, say, kind of things, that is conditional compilation and execution. So we have a tick if def, tick else. This operator, what is there? It is called a tick, then and def. Okay. So these are the compiler directives what you can use. So here we, based on the example, we can just look out for tick if def. So if you have a module, if you have say macro named test. So this statement provides that if you have a macro, text macro, which is named text test, then only you compile the module, or else you can leave it. So that is what it specifies. If definition, if def test. So if you write this one right along with this statement, then it will compile the module if it has a test macro named test. Then here you can see that else is also specified. If this is not there, if this is not, this is optional. This is optional. This part is optional. If this is, so if this macro is not there, then what you do is you do the other part. You compile the module stimulus as default. You do the other part. Now, since you have if def right, you should have a end if. That is tick if def and tick and if. So this is what is happening. Then next you have module top. So here that is the second example what you are looking out for. So here instantiate the module unconditionally. Okay, so here tick if def add underscore b2. So what is happening in this case is b2 is instantiated conditionally if text macro add underscore b2 is defined. If this is not there, then b2 will not be instantiated. So that is what it is specifying. This is instantiation of bus master, that is b1 is the one instance. Now b2 you are instantiating for the bus master, but this is dependent on whether this macro is there or not. If this macro is not there, then this instantiation is not possible. So since if def is there, you should have an end if. And here you can see that you don't have else if. You don't have else part. So else is optional. So this is conditional compilation. Okay. So next you have conditional execution. So execution is happening during the runtime. So you can have say the execution based on some conditions. So you can skip certain part of the execution. You can skip the certain part of the statements during the runtime. So that is how it is done. It is made. It is done using the keyword. That is, this is a task actually, system task using this hash. Dollar test and the dollar plus arguments. So using this, we can go for conditional execution. But remember that this is not a standard reference. So therefore, many of the Verilog, this thing don't have this. It is not standard. So in one, this thing it might run, in other it might not run because this is not standard, which is put forth. For example, you are using a for loop. For is a standard for all the Verilogs and say whatever we have discussed now. So there we can use it. But it is like universal. This is not like universal thing over here. Okay. So just an example to look for module test, you have initial, begin and end. Now here you are seeing that if this part, that is if you have a display variable, if you have a display variable set, so if display variable is set, then you display the values. If display variable is not set, then you can just specify that there is no display, there is no display possible or no display is present. So that is what you are looking out for. So depending on using this one, you can go forth with the conditional execution. So this is conditional execution. If display variable is present, then you display this variables. So this is happening during the runtime. This is happening during the runtime. If this is not there, then you use put forth a message telling that no display. So that is what is happening in this part. Okay. Time scales is not there for you. So last part which comes is I'll be be discussing one or two things under this one, useful system tasks. So under that you have so many things like file out, displaying hierarchy, strobing, then random number generator, memory initialization, value change them. Just a few examples I'll be discussing. Rest all you can just have a look for. So file output, how do I look for a file output in a Verilog? So I make use, or how do I open a file? How do I close a file? How do I write into a file? So these are just a few things what you can look out. So here, how do you specify? You use the system task f open, that is $f open, and you provide the name of the file. So if you have a file handler, you can put forth that in the file handler, and then you can operate on those things. Now, $f open actually returns a 32-bit multi-channel descriptor. So since it is a 32 multi-channel descriptor, it depends on which bit is set in that entire stuff. So if it is 32-bit, only one of the bit can be set over there, and we can just check out which file has to be written. Now, if you are having multiple f opens, right? For example, here we have. Hmm? So we have a multi-channel descriptor. So for that, this thing, so integer, handle one, handle two, and handle three. So three handlers are being defined, which are of 32 bits in length. Then you have a standard output is open, then descriptor is provided with the 32 bits. And initially what happens is the 0th bit is set. 0th bit is set. Now when I begin this, right, handle one, and if I put forth open the file one dot out using this f open task, then what happens is handle one will be having bit one set. So if this bit is set, the other bits are reset. So it is like all zeros and this is 1 0. So the 1 0 means what? It is decimal 2. In hexadecimal also it is 2. So that is handle 1 will be having a value of 2. Now similarly, if I go for handle 2 and open the next this thing, what happens is, so here what we have to look out is, as I keep on using this f open, right? F open. So first the zeroth bit is set. Next when f open, when I encounter, the next bit will be set. The others will be reset. Next one, when I encounter this one, the say bit 2 will be set and the others will be reset. Then if I encounter another f open, right, the next bit will be again set and rest all will be 0. So again, if I continue, right, if I have another f open, right, then the next bit will be set and the remaining will be reset. That is, there'll be 0. So therefore, handle 3, if you just see, that is this is the third file what you are opening. So when this is the third file, what happens is bit 0 was set here, first f open executed. So bit 1 got set here, then next f open got executed, then this bit got set, and lastly this one is there. So this bit will be set to 1 and the others to 0. So it is like 1 0 0 0. So which is 8. So therefore, handle 3 will be having a value of 8, indicating that bit 3 is set. This is the third file what you have opened. So this is what is happening in this case. Okay. So this is the file handle what we are looking out. And now, apart from this, we can have a few more other things like writing the files like f display, f monitor, f write, f strobe. So previously we had discussed display and monitor also, how these tasks are utilized. So here, this is how it specifies f display, that is $f display. File descriptor, what you have, say for the descriptor handle 1 and handle 2, what you have specified, that one. Then P1 to Pn. So P1 to Pn can be the variable signal names or the quoted strings. So here just an example of f display and f monitor. You can just have a look. Integer description 1, 2, 3, three file descriptors you have defined. Then descriptor 1 is equal to handle 1, say concatenated with the 1. So handle 1 value is what? Handle 1 value is it is all 0. It is 1 0 concatenated. Sorry, not concatenated. It is ORed with 1. It is ORed with 1. So when it is ORed with 1, what is the value? It is 1 and 1. So I had 1 0 and remaining all zeros. So these are all zeros. This is 0 and it is 1. So when I OR it, it will be 1 1 and remaining all zeros. So this is equivalent to 3. So what happens is, here we can see that it is bitwise OR. Therefore, what happens is descriptor 1 will be having a value of 3 over here, hexadecimal value. So now what you are doing is you are using f display descriptor 1, that is the 3, and display 1. So what this does is it writes to the files file.out and standard out. So since handle 1 is there and the just 1 is there, so file 1.out and standard out. So similarly here you can see that two XORing operations are there, handle 2 and handle 1. So again, if I XOR it, it turns out to be 6 over here. And then for that, this thing, you can go for display 2 and you can write the files to file 1.out and file 2.out. So that is what is happening. So these are just a few directives what you can look out for, useful directives or the tasks or functions which you are looking out for. So then how do I go ahead with the closing? So I can make use of f close, $f close, and you specify the handle. So once you execute this statement, right, then you cannot read or write into the file. So handle 1 is pertaining to file 1.out. So if f close is executed, right, I cannot perform any operation on this now because it has been closed. If I want to perform, then again I have to open that file and then perform the operation. So it is like you have the system, and if you want to write something in Word file, right, you have to open that Word file. If you don't open that Word file, then you cannot write anything into that Word file. So it is in that way. Okay, so these are just a few things, few useful tasks. So in the similar way, you have other display hierarchy and other stuffs. So you can, and these things we had discussed, say hash m. So what does hash m do? So that this thing we can just look out for. Okay. So these are a few things pertaining to Verilog